Damn, it's getting harder and harder to find other monsters to kill and absorb what's going on. Shouldn't forests in games be the most dangerous places possible? Lohan wondered in frustration. He had been playing for 2 hours and hadn't found any creatures worth killing. In addition to the vegetation he was devouring, Lohan also found small insects that weren't even worth 01 bio, which he was devouring just for variety, but so far he hadn't received any new skills from them. Fortunately, after 1 hour of absorbing biomass, he accumulated enough biomass for another upgrade in efficient digestion. Strangely, instead of just increasing his total efficiency by 10, as it always had, another window popped up. After 10 minor evolutions, efficient digestion is undergoing a qualitative evolution. New feature obtained: digestive filter. Efficient digestion, LV10, LV11. Increases digestion, speed, and efficiency in converting matter. 10 per level exponential features digestive filter. The organism is now able to identify and isolate specific components during molecular breakdown. It can choose not to digest certain parts of an object or creature, keeping them intact inside its body, or expelling them after cleaning. Reading this description, Lohan was confused. It didn't seem like a bad option. It was obviously something good, and that would be useful to him at some point, but at that moment, would it change anything for him? Sure. Leveling up the skill made Lohan's efficiency in absorbing biomass increase even more, rising from the 1584 bio he gained with the clone to the current 1756 bio, an increase of 172 bio in just one upgrade of this skill. This was the snowball effect that Lohan had been hoping this skill would bring him. From small decimal upgrades when he entered the game to now each upgrade increasing the amount he received per hour by a huge amount, and this was a value that would only grow more and more from now on. But the issue of the digestive filter was still somewhat confusing. Paying attention to his insides to the objects being digested, he saw a mess. Small pieces of rocks, small balls of dirt and dust leaves from different plants, petals from various flowers, even the remains of insects he found along the way, floated inside him around the mana stone he received from the elf girl. Since some things were digested faster than others in the last few days, Lohan absorbed various things and let his body absorb different things at its own pace, without worrying about wasting or absorbing insufficient biomass. Since there was no difference in absorption speed based on the quality of what he absorbed, Lohan just absorbed everything. But wanting to test the filter, Lohan decided to explore this peculiarity. With a thought, he managed to pause the absorption of everything inside him, reducing his biomass gain to 0. Then he focused on absorbing only the remains of insects, which quickly raised his biomass gain to a maximum of 1464 bio, disregarding the value of the clone. At such a high rate, the few insects inside him disappeared in a few seconds, being consumed at an alarming speed. Surprised, Lohan began to absorb the flower petals, and a little slower than the insects, the petals were digested, followed by plant leaves, then roots, and other plant matter. After a few minutes, Lohan had digested everything inside him, leaving only the mana stone, and with these tests he discovered something very interesting about the digestive filter. With this feature, not only could he choose between several objects what he wanted to consume, but he also had complete control over what to digest in the same object. He could control the acid inside him to digest only the dead parts of plants, only certain parts of an insect's body, or even digest only the most nutritious parts scattered on the ground, ignoring the useless parts with little biomass value. By ending these tests, Lohan also discovered that he was getting in his own way by absorbing everything that appeared in front of him, instead of wasting internal space to carry soil and stones which had very low biomass value, losing some bodily control to keep these things inside him, being slowly digested. It would be better to absorb only things rich in biomass and carry several of these small things, just as he carried the mana stone. Carrying less stuff, but more biomass would allow him to maintain a large stock of biomass and not sacrifice so much of his own mobility. Not to mention that Lohan finally had an idea of how to get gold in Elysium with this race. If he found something precious, such as valuable ores trapped in rocks, or valuable botanical items with structural problems, he could absorb the defective parts and sell only the completely clean, valuable parts, which would probably make those things more valuable than their original value generating. Sure, I still don't know where to find something valuable like that, or even where to sell those things, but maybe I have an idea about the second point. With that in mind, Lohan decided to take a little risk again. Even though he was still a weak and fragile slime, a week had already passed since he took out the loan to play Elysium, and he only had 3 more weeks to get 912 to avoid being arrested. So he desperately needed to find a source of income, preferably something stable and useful for his development. And he had seen a possibility of that in the encounter he had yesterday. The problem was looking up at the sky and realizing that it was starting to get dark. Nighttime had never been a problem for him as slime, since his vision remained as good as it was during the day, and as such, a strange life form, his slime body also didn't need rest or sleep, but an elf might be different. I just hope she's there. After a few minutes rolling at full speed, Lohan returned to the place where he had found the elf girl yesterday. Fine and, unfortunately, the place was empty. Some parts of the surrounding grass were completely devoured, while others remained intact, a destruction that he had not caused. Curious, Lohan began to look around, searching for the cause of this. He hadn't encountered another creature in so long that the possibility of another slime being there was exciting. With instinctive perception, LV4 Lohan's spatial awareness was much more advanced than it had been initially, to the point that a slight movement in a distant flower, incongruous with the speed and direction of the wind, quickly gave him the location of another creature. This made Lohan's heart race. Finally, another interesting opponent. And to his surprise, observing that location, there was another slime absorbing a mana stone like him. Why does that slime also have a mana stone? Is the elf girl feeding it too? Realizing this, Lohan hesitated a little. Not that he was jealous of a girl in a game he had known for a few minutes, but because if that slime was also fed by the girl devouring, it could result in a loss of affinity with the girl, cutting off a possible route to profit and improvement in the future. Damn, should I wait for it to leave this area? If I devour it out of her reach, she won't know it was me, right? But seeing how slowly that slime moved, Lohan realized that not only was its base speed not very high, but it wasn't even trying to leave, focusing only on absorbing the mana stone. I don't think it even intends to leave here before it finishes absorbing that mana stone. This frustrated Lohan even more, but as he slowly approached that slime, a surprised voice rang out. "Two? Why are there two slimes here?" Startled, Lohan quickly rolled slightly away from the direction of the voice and crouched down to camouflage himself. But upon seeing his attitude, the voice grew even louder as the vibration of the ground indicated to Lohan that bipedal footsteps were rapidly approaching him. Fortunately, at that moment, he also recognized the voice. "It's you," the elf girl said excitedly, as she crouched down and picked Lohan up, using her big blue eyes to stare at Lohan with curiosity. "Little girl, I thought you had died or forgotten me. I've been waiting here for you since I finished my daily studies." This surprised Lohan. "She's really curious about me, right?" Not knowing how to react, Lohan extended a tentacle and wiped some dirt and dust from the girl's cheek, using the digestive filter to ensure he wouldn't hurt her. Seeing this, the girl's eyes sparkled even more. "You're really different. It's like you think like a normal creature." In response to her question, Lohan made his tentacle change into the shape of a hand, giving a thumbs up. Seeing that little hand as small as a baby's give a thumbs up made the girl laugh. "Now I'm sure it's you. You know, since you took so long to come see me, I even gave the mana stone I reserved for you to one of your brothers, thinking it was you." Looking at the slime absorbing the mana stone and understanding what had happened, Lohan became even more frustrated. Then he caught something. "She said she only gave the mana stone to that slime because she thought it was me, so if I take it back she won't mind, right? The problem is how to communicate this to the girl." Thinking for a few seconds, Lohan had an idea. Extending a finger from his small baby hand upward, Lohan caught the girl's attention. "What is it? Do you have something to tell me?" she asked excitedly, her eyes shining even brighter with curiosity. On her lap, the little slime pointed his finger at himself, then turned his small hand into a short sword and pointed it to the other slime, turned the sword into a small hand, grabbing something and brought it inside himself. That was the best Lohan could think of, but surprisingly the girl was very smart, understanding perfectly what he meant. "You want to attack the other slime and take the mana stone for yourself? That's fine," she said, putting Lohan on the ground and looking at him even more intently. "But be careful, you may be one of a kind. Don't hurt yourself too much. Just to get something as cheap as a mana stone, I can give you another one tomorrow if you really want it." But Lohan didn't accept wanting to kill that slime with his own hands to receive exp and the chance to receive other skills. Then in front of the girl, the little slime deformed, forming small spikes all over its body, with the texture of its outer layer changing from something soft and crystalline to a more resistant and matte appearance, indicating that it was harder. Then it began to roll toward the other slime, which was still completely oblivious, standing in the same place absorbing the mana stone. The speed of the slime she talked to increased with the spikes, even helping to generate more friction. Small pieces of the other slime's jelly exploded around them, corroding some of the plants there for a few seconds before being extinguished by small sparks of fire that flew from the girl's staff. Lohan controlled himself as much as possible to absorb what he could from the other slime's jelly, while quickly grabbing a transparent stone in its center, his opponent's core and mana stone, and bringing it inside himself, causing his interior to have 2 cores and 2 mana stones. The 2 cores were not very different, looking almost identical, but the mana stones were quite different, with one being much larger than the other. Seeing that scene, the elf girl was very shocked. Shouldn't slime battles be bloody gelatinous and very exhausting, with them trying their best to digest each other until someone digests the opponent's core? What kind of battle was that? My little slime just ran over her opponent like a carriage runs over a pumpkin. And seeing Lohan using her little hands to pick up the core and mana stone of the other slime, she was even more certain that this little slime was special, since in her 159 years of life she had never encountered such a unique slime. My master will go crazy when she finds out about this little slime. But knowing her master, Aeliana knew how dangerous it would be for her new friend, So she decided to postpone this meeting even further, taking advantage of this time to get to know this fascinating little creature better, who despite being one of the biggest stupid pests in the forest, was intelligent enough to talk to her. While Aeliana looked at Lohan even more excited and curious about this new friend she was making, Lohan was happy reading about the new skill he had received and the evolution of a skill he already had. Viscous Flow LV9 LV10. No. Memory Resonance LV1. By absorbing another creature's brain or core memory fragments, and the creature's instincts can be absorbed. As soon as Lohan learned this skill, the core of the slime he had just stolen reacted, transmitting part of the creature's memories as well as instincts it had developed during its lifetime. Fortunately, absorbing these instincts and memories did not negatively affect Lohan. Instead of incorporating these instincts into himself, as if he had merged with the creature he absorbed, it was as if he were watching a video on his cell phone. The memories passed across the screen. The instincts were explained, but it was up to him to train those instincts and make them permanent, or ignore them and let them eventually be forgotten. This is amazing. If I absorb a creature with special knowledge or instincts, I can absorb everything that is useful to me. But will I become a brain-eating zombie? I don't think a creature like that would be well received in society. And the worst case, I can just use it in secret, right? No one needs to know that I can absorb the memories and instincts of those I devour. The memories and instincts he received from the slime were useless, just shallow memories about where it came from and where it could find tasty food were in the creature's mind. But what to expect from a creature that digested something nutritious and stood still, foolishly waiting to die? The upgrade to Viscous Flow was also very useful, increasing his speed again from 0.47 m/s. Whenever he increases his size, his speed also decreases, so evolving this skill from time to time is great, not to mention that saving 75 biomass for it. Testing the new speed, Lohan moved from side to side with agility and was satisfied. "Did you get faster?" Aeliana asked in surprise, looking at Lohan intently. Ever since Lohan got off her lap, Aeliana kept her eyes on him with total focus, and surprisingly he was moving faster than when he attacked the other slime. Lohan froze when he heard that question, but not knowing how to answer, he played dumb and just looked at her. Aeliana looked at him suspiciously, but gave up after a few seconds. Sigh. "Okay, you can't expect too much from a little creature like you, right? If I'm not mistaken, my master already mentioned that you absorb traits from other creatures." Looking up at the sky and noticing the large number of stars shining, her eyes widened. "Damn, my master is going to kill me, little friend. I have to go tomorrow. I'll come see you again, with an even better mana stone." Saying that, she rubbed Lohan's head and waved her staff, causing a small tornado to appear around her and carry her away with ease. Seeing a demonstration of magic up close for the first time, Lohan was shocked. With the graphics of this game being so realistic, he even forgot that he was just in a game. Magic is so cool. Will I ever be able to learn it too? As a worshipper of mages loving to watch videos and streams of people playing mages in all kinds of games, Lohan imagined that perhaps only magic could heal his body in the other world, where technology had failed him. Only magic could give him hope to live like a normal person. Unfortunately, he had never had any contact with anything magical in the other world. From the memories of the old Lohan in this world, there were some confusing things happening on other planets with powerful super soldiers using high-tech weapons to wage war with other civilizations. Now seeing magic so closely, something awakened in his chest. With a sound of something breaking and cracking, a flood of energy gushed through his body, filling and nourishing his jelly, little by little, bringing a refreshing and icy sensation. Meanwhile, strange memories flashed before him, of a small white bird with majestic blue plumage flying gracefully through the sky, conjuring ice spikes for fun at other birds. Everything seemed very real, much more intense and immersive than the memories and instincts he received when absorbing the slime's core a few minutes ago. Wait, where are these memories and this feeling coming from? Looking inside himself, Lohan realized that the mana stone the elf had given him the day before had been completely absorbed. So these memories are from the mana stone she gave me. Wait, what is this energy inside me? No, Magic Core LV1. The vital core undergoes a qualitative transmutation, becoming a magical energy engine. It emits constant pulses that saturate the cellular structure, forcing the opening of conductivity to support, filter and circulate raw energy throughout the organism. As soon as Lohan learned this new skill, his slime core began to change, with small bright blue lines appearing on the previously transparent surface of the stone that holds his consciousness. Through these lines a pleasant cool energy leaked out, and when it came into contact with the jelly of his body, the energy flowed freely through his body, while any internal jelly touched by it became slightly stronger, denser and more resistant. Without a physical body to contain the flow of mana, instead of creating physical pathways for the mana to pass through his body, simply let the mana flow freely while nourishing everything it touched, but containing the internal energy with a thin but resilient membrane. This feeling of coldness, it's as if it's coming from a magical element. The memories showed me that the bird that owned this mana stone could use ice magic. Maybe that's my affinity. Looking around, Lohan didn't notice anyone, even with instinctive perception. LV4. But to be sure, he still rolled further away for 10 minutes, moving 300 meters away from where he was. Feeling around again and noticing nothing, Lohan finally focused on the instincts and memories he received from that call and tried to replicate the skill that the bird used most. Lohan concentrated. He closed his eyes and dove into the white bird's memory. He could feel the cold rising from the center of the bird's core, passing through small channels throughout its body, and the way the energy condensed in its beak as it left its body. Once it left the body, part of the energy dispersed into the air, but most of it was still under the bird's control in these memories. Lohan sought out that cold energy leaking from his new core. Unlike biomass, which was dense and heavy, mana was fluid, electric, and at that moment, sharp. He felt the flow run through the new blue lines of his core and spread through the jelly of his body. Where the mana passed, his temperature dropped dramatically. He felt no pain, only an invigorating numbness. Gradually, he forced the jelly at the front of his body to mold itself. Following the bird's instinct, he not only opened his mouth and spat out the energy, but he compressed it. The frozen mana began to spin at a central point, the humid air around Lohan slowly freezing, creating small shards of ice that merged into a translucent spike, sharp as a crystal dagger. Now go. The ice spike shot out with a hissing sound, cutting through the air in a straight blue line. The projectile traveled the meters away, in the blink of an eye, and hit the trunk of an ancient tree. The impact did not knock the tree down, but the ice was so dense that it pierced the thick bark, leaving a hole the size of Lohan's small fist made with tentacles, surrounded by a crust of frost that began to spread slowly through the wood. Lohan didn't even have time to celebrate. The moment the thorn left his body, the feeling of fullness disappeared, replaced by a frightening vacuum. Mana 015 warning, magic exhaustion detected. Lohan's 360-degree vision spun. The blue glow of the lines in his core instantly faded. If before he felt like a charged battery, now he felt like a deflated balloon. His gelatin, once firm and agile because of his evolutions, became heavy and flaccid. He tried to move, but his body just swayed uselessly in place, like a lazy puddle of water. Damn, that hurts. My mind feels like it's been chewed up. The effort of converting that raw mana into a structured spell, without ever having done so before, drained not only his energy, but his mental stamina. Even exhausted and withered on the dirt floor, Lohan looked at the hole in the tree with a pride he had never felt before. I did it. I used magic. He thought excitedly as he began to absorb the other mana stone quickly. His body wanted to sleep for a week, completely exhausted from what he had just done, but since his gaming hours were limited daily, especially since today was still Monday, with so many days left until the weekend, Lohan forced himself to stay awake and actively absorb biomass from the second mana stone. The process was painfully slow. If he were to rely on recovering mana, naturally, according to his calculations, it would take him more than 20 hours to recover the mana he had spent. Fortunately, he could use biomass to nourish the magic core, LV1, as fuel, accelerating mana generation in exchange for biomass. The feeling of helplessness sucks. Although he felt great when casting magic, like a huge rush of dopamine, the helplessness that came afterwards made him feel like he was back in his hospital bed. Feeling an anxiety attack coming on, Lohan did think twice and spent 10 biomass to level up this skill. Magic Core LV1, LV2. As soon as this skill leveled up, the amount of mana converted increased. The core consumed even more biomass, but the mana that was produced was denser and of higher quality. Feeling his own body, Lohan realized that his mana had increased, but he didn't know exactly how much. I can just look at my status. Mana 15, 165. Glancing quickly at his mana section, below experience, Lohan was shocked to realize that his mana had increased by 15 points after evolving the magic core. My mana increased by 10, but was it exponential, like efficient digestion? To confirm this doubt, Lohan decided to spend another 13 bio and evolve the skill again. Magic Core, LV2, LV3, Mana 15, 181. Seeing that the increase was 165 instead of the previous 15, Lohan was delighted. Another skill with exponential growth, great. Excited by this, Lohan decided to explore the area further, looking for a worthy opponent to test his magic on. With a biomass gain of 1756 bio, in 2 hours Lohan recovered what he spent on evolving the magic core and the biomass spent to replenish his mana. Unfortunately, in those 2 hours, he did not encounter any magical creatures. When Lohan was considering whether it was worth moving further away from the place where he had met the elf girl, he heard a sharp cry. Looking up at the sky, he saw a bird descending at high speed with its claws pointed at him. Frightened, Lohan activated all the skills he had available. He made his exoskeleton more resistant, reinforced the membrane, accelerated his speed in the opposite direction of the bird, and finally activated the weapon he had been so eager to test. In a few seconds, a transparent and sharp ice spike smaller than the first one he made formed in front of him. And before the bird that looked like a brown eagle could react, the spike was thrown in its direction, cutting through the air with ease. Trying to struggle to dodge that almost invisible object, the bird screamed for the last time. In a few seconds, the bird's body fell to the ground, with an open hole in its belly that strangely did not bleed. Looking closely, Lohan confirmed that the bird was still alive and approached it carefully. The bird looked at him with a mixture of anger, disbelief, and fear. Lohan rolled closer. The bird tried to crawl away, but despite not bleeding, having its stomach cut open prevented blood from circulating through its body, causing it to slowly lose the ability to move. And in a few seconds, consciousness also disappeared. Waiting another 5 minutes, Lohan finally confirmed that the bird was dead and covered it, ready to absorb the creature that had tried to take his life just a few minutes earlier. This bird was the largest creature Lohan had consumed so far. Although there were large slimes, their size was nothing extraordinary, whereas the insects he devoured, as the name suggests, were just small insects. Confirming once again that the bird was dead, seeing no signs of life, Lohan rolled toward the dead animal. Slowly his slime covered the bird, still without softening the exoskeleton, to confirm for the 4th time that this was not a trap, and began to dissolve the bird with the exoskeleton. Only when he felt no resistance in digesting the bird's flesh did Lohan relax. "Sigh, dealing with creatures like this, while I'm so fragile, is scary." Noticing the speed of absorption, Lohan was surprised by the amount of biomass this bird had. Although it had no mana, the vitality of its flesh alone was very rich. However, this bird was so large that Lohan couldn't carry it while digesting it, as he did with the mana stones, so in order to digest it quickly, Lohan completely paused the digestion of the mana stone. In order not to attract other predators, he even completely covered the bird while using the digestive filter to digest the exposed blood, which could spread its smell through the air. But even though the bird was rich in biomass, it still couldn't compare to a mana stone. At a speed of 1756 bio, it took Lohan only an hour and a half to digest it completely. Instinctive perception, LV4, LV5. Meh, it was a bad upgrade, saving me 439 bio, but it was that great either. With this skill leveling up, Lohan felt that the world around him became even clearer, with more details being easily seen by him. The grass around him became greener. Small movements of insects were perceived as different from movements caused by the wind, and details in more distant things. With so much biomass gained from consuming this bird, Lohan felt his biomass stock filling up again and bought more upgrades. Efficient digestion, LV11, LV12 to 145 bio. This raised his biomass gain to 1932 bio, an increase of almost 2 bio with a single upgrade, even though the price of upgrades for this skill was getting more and more expensive. But it was in the next skill that a surprise came. After 10 minor evolutions, Viscous Flow is undergoing a qualitative evolution. New feature obtained selective adherence. Viscous Flow LV10, LV11 to 1026 bio. Increases agility in controlling one's own body by 10 per level. Features: selective viscosity. The organism can now alter the viscosity of the part of the body in contact with the ground to become perfectly slippery or extremely adhesive at will. Reading the description of this new characteristic, Lohan's eyes lit up. Not only did his speed increase from 0.51 millisecond to 0.56 milliseconds, but now he could make his body as sticky as glue or as slippery as wet soap. Understanding this characteristic, a bold idea popped into his mind. Extending a tentacle upward, Lohan grabbed the side bark of a tree and tried to swing forward like a certain web-headed creature. His heart was excited by the sensation of swinging like that, but as soon as he rolled forward, generating the kinetic force necessary to launch himself, a tremendous pain arose in his tentacle. Looking scared, Lohan saw in detail how his jelly membrane couldn't withstand the weight and slowly tore. The pain of having his membrane torn was agonizing, causing Lohan to desperately cancel the grip of that limb. But the damage had already been done. His body rolled forward uncontrollably as the tentacle retracted and biomass was used up to heal itself. Even the clone was ignored, remaining static due to Lohan's lack of control, who at that moment was only trying to heal himself and deal with the pain. What a stupid idea. How could a membrane as thin as an egg membrane support my basketball-sized body, filled with my acid jelly? Frustrated, Lohan spent biomass to heal himself and went back to diligently digesting grass and small insects, focused only on accumulating biomass and buying new upgrades. When his biomass stock reached its maximum, Lohan would buy another evolution and continue the process. His focus was on buying upgrades that improved the efficiency of biomass digestion, but in order not to be limited to the space he could cover so as not to stray too far from the elf's location, Lohan bought a few more upgrades in speed, while discreetly spending a few units of biomass to buy upgrades in membrane resistance. This process of grinding after a failure was good for his mindset, which was already starting to get bored. What he didn't know was that while he was dealing with failure and buying several evolutions at a speed that no other slime could match even with an infinite supply of biomass, The same white fox that saw Lohan learning to control the clone the previous morning now looked at that silly slime with even more suspicion. The fox's small eyes looked between the slime and the tree. He had attached himself to a few seconds ago, and a very human expression of suspicion appeared on her face. Lohan had no idea that the reason he couldn't find any other slimes, magical animals or insects, wasn't because the slimes had spread out too far or because it was too safe near the elf girl, but because there was another predator like him desperately killing monsters. The little fox, still with the white fur of its mouth, slightly stained with blood, kept its distance and watched uncertainly, not knowing whether to approach or not. Despite instinctive perception, LV5 Lohan didn't notice the white fox watching him farming peacefully until the end of the day. The day's gains were very rewarding, even though they could have been better if he had encountered more formidable enemies, as he would have been able to get better upgrades for his skills, or even more powerful new skills. But he was already grateful for what he had achieved. When he logged off, Lohan spent all the biomass he had stored, leaving the new passive digestion, LV5, to accumulate biomass for him, again while he slept or was at college. His current total biomass accumulation speed was 2854 bio, with passive digestion accounting for 305 bio of that total, which may seem small, but considering that he would be offline for around 17 hours, that would still be 5185 biomass stored AFK. The next day, Lohan woke up feeling even better. His body, which had previously been pale, thin and malnourished, was slowly regaining a healthy color, softness and muscle tone. Even though he was only eating the nutrient solution, his body was absorbing these nutrients even better. It seems that increasing the levels of efficient digestion and passive digestion really makes a big difference in my nutrition. Looking in the mirror, Lohan was surprised to see muscles forming on his body. Because he had very little body fat now that his body was absorbing the best nutrients from what he ate, and perhaps even from the air around him, he was slowly becoming more defined. Muscle lines were appearing all over his body in a very harmonious way. His belly, which had always been flabby both due to extreme poverty in this world and his inability to exercise in the other world, was now developing a discreet six-pack abs, with signs that an eight-pack was on the way. His arms, once thin and weak, could now support his body weight for short moments during training, showing a great improvement. Satisfied with this progress, Lohan smiled before throwing a black hoodie over his body, covering his head, putting on a protective mask for the toxic outside air, and leaving the house, completely hiding the changes. The walk to the bus stop was even smoother, his body moving with much more lightness, firmness and control. Unfortunately, in this world he was still just a survivor from the lower zone, a nobody to people like him, and even more so to people above. So he just took advantage of his time in college to hear news and gossip from Elysium, something he didn't do very often since he spent most of his time playing games while trying his best to minimize his own presence. Fortunately, his work in this regard was practically perfect. No one came to talk to him during class. The students from the lower zone were too busy hiding from the students from the upper zone to approach him, while the students from the upper zone were too busy living their own lives to worry about a nobody like him. If it were just that, Lohan's day would have been as normal as ever. But there was one small detail that confused him. I know that my passive digestion works better in college since the air here is purer and more nutritious, but why has it become more powerful now? Class was about to begin, when suddenly the group of students from the upper zone returned to the classroom, passing close to Lohan and causing this strange feeling. Strangely, this strange situation became even more intense when another person passed by him, Isabella Vance. He felt as if before passive digestion, LV5 was absorbing only 0.5 bio. But when Isabella entered the room and passed by him, that value skyrocketed to 30 bio. How did she alone manage to increase the nutrition in the air? As much as he wanted to look at her and search for something different, he knew the harm it could cause and forced himself to keep his head down. But his mind was working at high speed, processing everything that had happened. During class, Lohan remained discreet, but with each person who passed by him, he analyzed the air nutrition, how much biomass he absorbed from the person's presence. Apparently, of the 30 students of the upper class, 20 increased his biomass gain from 0.5 to 0.6 bio. He didn't hear many conversations, but coincidentally, or not everyone in this group who talked about their classes in Elysium were common class players. Another 6 students in this group increased their gain by 0.2 bio, twice that of the previous group. From this group, he only heard 2 people talking about Elysium, and coincidentally, or not, these 2 people commented on their uncommon classes in Elysium. Due to a lack of data, Lohan could only assume that the other 4 students also had uncommon races, like the 2 he heard, something to note and pay attention to in the future. 4 other students increased Lohan's bio gain by 0.4 bio. Of these students, only 1 commented that his class was rare. For Isabella, even though she didn't get up at any point during class when class was over, Lohan specifically stayed seated a little longer, waiting for Isabella to pass by him, and confirmed that she increased his bio gain by 20 bio. Despite being close to these people, his bio gain had increased, and this was the real world. What in the world could change a person to the point that they exude biomass in the real world? Just like me, They are also undergoing changes and evolutions because of the game, right? But if you noticed, adding Isabella, the total number of students who awakened a change in Lohan was 31, but there are only 30 students from the upper zone in Lohan's class. Among the group of 4 students that Lohan assumed had rare classes or races, only 3 were from the upper zone, with the last one being a quiet boy, who was also part of the lower zone like Lohan. Surprised by this discovery, Lohan quickly got up from his seat and ran to the bus stop. Some students from the upper zone saw this poor boy running with a gas mask hanging from his backpack, and although they frowned, they didn't pay much attention to it. Seeing his target at the bus stop waiting for transportation to the lower zone, Lohan sighed in relief, adjusted the mask on his face, and blended into the crowd, watching the boy with curiosity, but with no intention of approaching him for the time being. During the trip from college to the lower zone, Lohan kept his distance from the boy, close enough to observe him, but far enough away that he, someone who had no idea he was being watched, couldn't notice. Surprisingly, the boy got off at a bus stop before Lohan's, closer than he had imagined. Lohan was even tempted to get off the bus and strike up a conversation with the boy. Perhaps connecting with another kid from the lower zone with a rare class would be useful to him. Not to mention that he had been alone for a week in this world, without talking to anyone. But thinking that it was still risky and uncertain, since he didn't know the boy or anything about his past, Lohan gave up on the idea and stayed on the bus. Tomorrow, I can try to talk to him at college. For someone with a slime race, getting gold was still uncertain, considering that his new life would be over if he didn't get money. In 3 weeks, befriending someone who could help him with that would be useful. Not because he was thinking of asking the boy for money, but just having a guide or someone who could help him resell items would be very useful. And between getting that help from someone like him from the lower zone, or relying on someone from the upper zone for that, Lohan would choose the former without thinking twice. Despite trying to appear superior, Lohan knew that the people from the upper zone were the most treacherous. He could meet people who would not hesitate to step on his head to climb higher. Back home, Lohan was a little mentally tired from his classes, which weren't that difficult for him, since in another world he used to argue with doctors while still a student. But as soon as he opened the door, he took off his clothes and started exercising. Although the scene of Lohan exercising completely naked in the living room of his apartment was strange, it was the only alternative he found to avoid spending even more money. Exercising itself was free, but washing clothes was not. And in a world like this, where humanity extracted everything it could from the planet in pursuit of profit without concern for sustainability, decontaminated, even his showers had to be rationed throughout the week, let alone wasting water to wash clothes every day. So Lohan came up with the current alternative, where he trained completely naked at home so that sweat wouldn't dirty his clothes. In any case, this was his body. A body 80 similar to his body from the other world, different only in health and muscle development, something he had seen naked often since he was born, so he didn't feel repulsed by it. And in fact, Lohan even liked the feeling of getting up and seeing his muscles pumping, swelling and developing before his very eyes. With his enhanced vision, he could see details better than high-definition zoom cameras from the other world. So even if the daily muscle gain wasn't exaggerated, since his body had little fat and his vision was incredible. After exercising, Lohan looked at himself again. Satisfied with the bodily changes, wiped himself down with wet wipes and put on the Elysium helmet. Slowly, his consciousness traveled back to the game world, watching the visual representation of him traveling through hyperspace. As his consciousness was pulled into Elysium, a small, bright blue body seemed to form from millions of particles coming from a tunnel of light. The first sensation to return was smell, changing from the unpleasant smell of mold and pollution in the real world to a pure and refreshing smell in the virtual world. The next sense to return was touch, with him losing his limbs, but gaining incredible control over every cell in his gelatinous body. Looking at the sun in the sky, Lohan smiled and absorbed that comfortable light. Who would have thought that even after transmigrating, I still couldn't feel the sun with my physical body? What will I need to do to feel this in the real world? Leave the planet. In the first world, Lohan couldn't feel the sun because he was stuck in a hospital bed. Sure, from time to time, some nurse would take pity on him and take him for a walk in the sun while pushing the bed he was lying in, but without the sensitivity of his body. Din, the second world, the sky was covered with pollution from factories and resource extraction machines. Even at college, the sky was so cloudy that Lohan still couldn't feel the sun directly. Only in this third world, the game Elysium, did Lohan truly feel the sun. And surprisingly, the virtual sensation that the game conveyed was the best of the 3 he had ever felt. Finishing enjoying the sun, the first thing Lohan did was open the menu. Name: Hallan Race Slime, Mythical Class Devourer, Mythical Level, 1 Experience, 38 100 Mana, 181 Evolutions Hidden. Who? I already have 38 experience points. If I accumulate 62 more, I can level up. What do I get for leveling up? Lohan was surprised by this. In other games, when the player leveled up, they unlocked new skills, gained stat points to become stronger, and gradually became stronger. But my growth is normal, right? Even though I am still level 1, I am already much stronger than other level 1 slimes. The problem is that I haven't found anything level 2 to compare myself to yet. As Lohan thought about this, as if hearing his inner thoughts, a creature he had never seen before appeared running through the forest. Gurod Sadwa, the creature roared as it swung its claws around, trying to hit something small that was running around. Because of the tall grass, Lohan couldn't see, but he knew that something close to his size was running away from that creature at high speed, dodging between the trees, taking advantage of the natural unevenness of the terrain. Using its small muscular green legs to run while struggling to balance its slightly disproportionate body, extending its claws forward as it tried to grab its target, but failing miserably, the goblin caught a glimpse of a bright blue ball, which because of the sunlight shone even brighter, and stopped. When that goblin's gaze focused on Lohan, he froze. Shit. Damn, why did a goblin appear out of nowhere in this forest? I've been looking for a week for some useful creature to kill and absorb some skills, but I haven't found anything, and suddenly a creature like that appears, out of nowhere, chasing something in front of me. Lohan was incredulous at such a coincidence. Using his 360-degree vision, he saw the bushes in front of the goblin continue to rustle, moving away at an even faster speed than before, perhaps taking advantage of the opportunity and disappearing among the trees, leaving only him and that goblin face to face. Seeing that, Lohan became even more suspicious of this coincidence. If you've always had this speed, why didn't you run like this before? But with no time to think further, the goblin's movement in front of him brought his focus back. The goblin let out a high-pitched squeal, a mixture of greed and scorn to him. Lohan looked like an exotic snack, like a delicacy from a 5-star restaurant. He clenched his empty hand, looked at his confused hand, but soon forgot about it, extending his long dirt-stained claws forward and advancing drooling yellowish saliva. Lohan did not retreat. On the contrary, he felt his instinctive perception, LV5, pulsing. The world seemed to slow down slightly. He felt the vibration of the goblin's heavy footsteps on the ground running awkwardly, while he saw the sloppy trajectory of the claw strike coming down towards him. Lohan quickly calculated his speed as he watched the monster leap. Shit, at only 0.61 millisecond. I want to be able to dodge this in time. If I try to jump to the side, it will catch me in the air with its other hand. Deciding that running away was not an option, Lohan focused on strengthening his defense and taking the impact heed-on. Membrane reinforcement, LV9. Body density, LV4. Reinforced exoskeleton, LV4. His body, which had previously been soft and malleable, became rigid and heavy in an instant. When the goblin's claws hit the top of his membrane, the sound was not one of something tearing, but rather a dry sound of impact, as if the monster were hitting a reinforced truck tire. But a fraction of a second before the impact, Lohan activated his new feature, selective viscosity. Pah! Both Lohan and the goblin's eyes widened, or rather only the goblin's eyes widened, and Lohan was shocked, with the goblin feeling as if he had hit something hard for a second, only for it to disappear immediately afterwards. With the blow hitting hard, and Lohan making the ground as slippery as a skating rink, his round body was sent flying, sliding through the forest, and putting distance between him and the goblin. The goblin, who was applying all his strength downward to try to crush the slime into the ground, lost his balance instantly, when the monster let out a sound of surprise as it slid sideways and fell heavily on its back on the damp earth. Taking advantage of the meters of distance he gained by sliding like soap, Lohan saw the goblin getting up awkwardly, his face covered in mud. The monster did not expect its meal to react that way. Okay, I have a chance now if I let him get close again. My reinforced defenses may not be enough against his weight, but to deal with him from a distance, I guess I can only try this. Lohan focused all his will on the magic core. Instantly, the blue lines on the surface of his inner stone glowed with a cold energy. He felt mana flowing like a river of liquid nitrogen through his gelatin, converging at the front of his body. Ace spike. The moisture in the air around Lohan condensed in a millisecond. A sharp, jagged, translucent ice spike appeared out of nowhere in front of him and shot like a dart toward the goblin. Sheeing. The goblin, still getting up, had no time to react. The ice spike dug deep into the creature's right thigh, piercing the flesh and momentarily pinning it to the ground. The goblin's scream was deafening. Greenish blood began to flow, freezing almost instantly at the edges of the wound. But instead of fainting or fleeing, the injury seemed to trigger insanity in the monster. With a violent movement, the goblin tore its own leg from the ice spike, tearing the flesh even further, and began to strike the air chaotically as it staggered forward. Mana 11181, warning critical mana reserves. Damn, my head feels like it's going to explode one shot, and I'm already in the red. This thing consumes too much energy. Lohan felt an overwhelming dizziness. His 360-degree vision began to waver, and he felt his body lose its steadiness. He wouldn't have mana for another shot, and the goblin was now an uncontrolled hurricane of claws and teeth, advancing regardless of the pain. Think, Lohan, if you don't have magic, and you're not fast, you have to be dirty. The goblin was only 3 meters away, moving in an erratic pattern, lashing out with its claws at nothing, destroying bushes and digging furrows in the ground. In its frenzy, Lohan realized that in its current state, the monster was no longer hunting. I can't make a sword shape with my body, or anything like that for very long, but I can be a trap, right? Lohan deactivated the reinforced exoskeleton to save biomass, and focused everything on selective viscosity. As the goblin approached for the final blow, Lohan did not slide away. He waited until the last second, and when the goblin's hand came down to grab him, Lohan made the surface of his own body extremely adherent. Splat. The goblin's claws were stuck to Lohan's membrane, as if they had been dipped in industrial tar. The monster tried to pull its hand back, but Lohan's weight increased by body density. The small cuts his claws caused to Lohan's membrane were quickly healed by his stored biomass, now preventing the goblin from releasing the slime. Sure, it would be stupid to use this against a human stronger than him, considering that he would be aware of grabbing Lohan with both hands and trying to tear him in half. But against a monster as foolish as the goblin, Lohan felt confident in trying it. If it went wrong, he could resist a little with the more resistant membrane, until he deactivated the viscosity and broke free from the monster's reach, which didn't understand what was happening. The goblin panicked and tried to bite Lohan, but the slime was faster. Using structural stability LV8, he didn't try to create an arm. He simply let his body collapse onto the goblin's face, stretching his mass like a heavy, suffocating blanket. You want to eat right then? Taste my efficient digestion up close. Lohan wrapped its entire 28 centimeters volume around the goblin's head and neck. The monster began to struggle violently, its hand scratching its own neck, trying to tear off the blue jelly. But the more it struggled, the more Lohan infiltrated. The feeling was horrible. The game was extremely realistic to the point that Lohan felt the creature's despair as if it were alive, its rapid heartbeat and the heat of its greenish blood. But he didn't let go. Sizzle. Lohan's digestive acid was taking effect. The skin on the goblin's face began to bubble and be converted into biomass. It was a slow, chaotic and brutal process. Lohan was not elegant, like an elven wizard. Now he was just a basic predator, capable of hunger, consuming something bigger than himself. After a few minutes of silent and desperate struggle, the goblin's movements began to cease. The creature's body relaxed and it fell to its knees before collapsing completely onto the forest floor. Biomass being acquired. Experience 7. New matter digested, chemosensory aptitude. Evolution available. Lohan, exhausted, and with his membrane slightly scratched by the desperate claws, finally broke free from what was left of the monster's face. He was mentally exhausted, and his jelly was cloudy. That was horrible. This was nothing compared to previous battles against slimes, which Lohan had easily trampled. Looking at the goblin's corpse, Lohan remembered his new skill. Now let's see what you had in your head. Memory resonance, LV1, hunger. He was feeling very hungry as he wandered through the forest, alone and lost. Ever since his pack was attacked, he had been chasing after the enemy to take revenge, but his body was growing weaker and weaker. The enemy always stayed close enough to attract his attention, but never far enough away for him to forget about it. This chase lasted over an hour. Without him realizing it, the last few minutes were basically him running in circles around the same area while chasing the enemy. This enemy was a strange white fox, which, despite showing several times that it had the agility to escape, never strayed too far from him, as if it were guiding him to a specific place. And to Lohan, who was absorbing the memories of this goblin, it became clear that the place the fox was prowling with the goblin was the area around where he had disconnected from the game. Is this fox another player? How does it know that I disconnected here, and that when I returned to the game, I would connect again? And how did it know that I would connect again at this time? The goblin's simple and foolish mind did not notice small details, but Lohan, with a human mind, quickly picked up on these details. And that was even more frightening than dealing with the goblin. In the games he watched in the other world, he knew that the greatest enemy was never the monsters, even though players died to monsters from time to time. In worlds with PvP, enabled the most frightening and treacherous creatures were other human players. Goblins have basic and shallow instincts, thinking only of the food they would eat and the women they would abuse. Humans are not like that. Humans are greedy, manipulative, cunning. Continuing to absorb the goblin's memory, Lohan saw his theory prove itself more and more correct. When the little slime formed from particles of light in the goblin's vision, the little fox darted between the trees at a speed she had never shown before and disappeared, clearly leaving the goblin to deal with the slime on purpose. But why do you want to deal with me this way? Wouldn't it be easier to just attack me with the strength you showed? From the goblin's memories, Lohan saw that Fox used her stealth and high speed to deal with a group of 10 goblins all by herself. Unfortunately, the memories began to fragment and disappear, even though Lohan continued to devour the goblin's brain. Is that the limitation of LV1 of this skill? Not bad. Lohan could spend some biomass to raise the skill's level and absorb more memories, but seeing that there was nothing useful in that goblin's empty head, he gave up, while continuing to devour the goblin's corpse with the help of the clone. Lohan read the new skill he had unlocked. Chemosensory aptitude, LV1. The outer membrane can detect odor particles and mana residues in a much more refined way. This skill was the reason why the goblin was so fixated on Lohan as soon as he saw him. Chemosensory aptitude was an innate ability that allowed goblins to smell in a much more advanced way, allowing them to easily detect the path to something delicious. And for the goblin, Lohan was an unparalleled delicacy. A beautiful ball of mana, completely saturated with magic for his level, something that if he ate, could not only satisfy his hunger, but keep him satisfied for several days. After receiving this skill, Lohan could also smell his surroundings, but at that moment, the only thing he could smell was the foul odor of the goblin he was digesting. What was once just another creature, upon activating this skill, Lohan felt as if he were eating garbage. How do I deactivate this blag, he thought desperately, controlling the urge to vomit, even though he didn't have a stomach to vomit anything. As soon as he thought about deactivating this skill, the odors around him magically disappeared, returning to the peace he felt. Although the smell was gone, the disgust he felt for the goblin's body still lingered, but Lohan was in no position to refuse such a biomass-rich meal. So despite his disgust, he persisted, absorbing as much as he could and using this new biomass to heal himself and recover mana. Since the goblin was also a low-level creature, its body didn't have that much biomass. With Lohan and the clone's absorption speed, in less than 2 hours he finished absorbing it. Damn, is the elf still in that place? Thinking about it, Lohan quickly rolled in that direction. To go faster, he even bought another evolution. Viscous Flow, LV12, LV13 1353 Bio 06, 1 millisecond 067 milliseconds. With a speed of 067 milliseconds, Lohan finally reached the speed that a 12-year-old human child had when walking. That may seem good, but that was the speed of a child walking. If the child ran after him, Lohan would be helpless. That's why he had to use viscosity so well in the previous battle, because even a goblin with small, disproportionate, and deformed legs still ran several times faster than him. As a creature that terrorized villages of adult humans, if they were slow, it would be easy for any human to exterminate them. But this was already a good start for Lohan. He wasn't that far from the place he had agreed with the elf to start the conversation, so in a few minutes he got there. Fortunately, this time there was no other competing slime around to fight him for the girl's mana stone. Just the elven girl looking around, worriedly, but when she saw the small blue and shiny ball rolling towards her, with a slime core and a mana stone almost completely digested inside it, she smiled and waved at him. Little friend, you finally made it. Meanwhile, in the distance, a white fox watched the scene with even more curiosity, hidden from both the slime and the elven girl. Running up to Lohan, the girl bent down and picked up the slime, smiling as she searched her magic cloak pocket for something. Lohan watched the situation with interest. If before he felt that the girl could be a good bridge between him and a possible civilization, now he felt that she was essential to his development. If it weren't for the ice spike he learned from the mana stone she gave him, he would most likely have died fighting that goblin. Damn, I've been playing for a week, and I am still weaker than a LV1 monster. No wonder no guild believed me when I said my race was mythical, even though I am a slime, Lohan thought frustratedly. Suddenly, Aeliana found what she was looking for and stood up to show it to Lohan with pride. Look, my little friend. Look how beautiful this mana stone is, Aeliana said with a huge smile on her face as she brought the stone closer to Lohan so he could see it better. Lohan didn't even need her to bring it that close. With his enhanced vision, he could see the mana stone perfectly, and from what he could see, this stone seemed to be of a higher grade than the stones she had given him before. Curious Lohan even activated chemosensory aptitude to understand it better, but that was a terrible idea. As soon as the skill was activated, the best smell he had ever smelled in his life invaded his consciousness almost like cocaine and instantly energized his mind. Shocked Lohan looked at the stone in the elf's hand and tried to understand it better. From the goblin's memories, the smell I'm sensing is several times better than the smell he sensed from me. Approaching the mana stone, Lohan tried to extend a tentacle to grab it, only for Aeliana to push the stone away, like a child playing with a small animal. Despite being tempted by the scent, Lohan felt a bitter taste that did not come from the stone. The girl's playfulness acted like a bucket of cold water on him, like the dynamic of an owner with his dog. Even though it could greatly benefit him, his pride was hurt by this action. I already had a shitty life in the first world. In the second world, I'm part of the lowest social class, and now in Elysium, I'm also going to become just someone else's pet. Do I really need to submit to these things just for power? Wasn't this game supposed to be fun for a hero's journey like everyone else? Disappointed, Lohan deactivated chemosensory aptitude, so he wouldn't be so tempted by that mana stone and selective viscosity to slip out of the girl's arm, much to her surprise. Although he knew it was a foolish idea, that he would reap a great benefit just by pretending to be a dog for a few seconds, Lohan had his pride and did not intend to submit himself like that to please someone's ego in exchange for a few handouts. Upon reaching the ground, Lohan turned and began to roll away, not bothering to stay any longer. Even the fox, who had been watching all this in silence, raised an eyebrow in astonishment, surprised by Slime's resolute attitude. Eliana was the only one lost in that situation, not understanding what had happened. Walking up to Lohan in confusion, she bent down and spoke to him. "Little friend, did I do something wrong?" she asked, her voice faltering. The euphoria of before was gone, replaced by an expression of someone who had just realized they had unintentionally hurt a friend. "I just wanted to see you happy with the gift. If you want, I'll get another one, but don't treat me like a stranger." Seeing her sadness, still not understanding why he had acted that way, Lohan also felt guilty. Analyzing the situation from the elf's perspective, Lohan really did seem like a pet, slightly more intelligent than a cat, but he also didn't know how to explain the situation. "Damn it, Lohan, look what you're doing. She's an elf. She's probably lived for decades or centuries dealing with cute creatures in the forest that are actually considered pets, and I'm here expecting her to treat me with human ethics and social etiquette, even though I've never given her any reason to." Lohan turned slowly. Eliana was still crouched down, the high-quality mana stone shining between her fingers, but the sparkle of excitement in her eyes had been replaced by a haze of guilt. Lohan knew that rolling away would only make him look even more like a temperamental pet. He needed to refresh her memory to show her that he wasn't just an irrational pet, but someone truly conscious and thinking with enough intelligence to be treated as an equal. Focusing on his structural stability, LV8 Lohan felt the mass of his body vibrate. Unlike the first time when forming that baby hand seemed like a Herculean effort that almost made him faint, now he had more control. The bluish gelatin condensed on top of him, stretching with a firmness he didn't have days ago. Eliana's eyes widened when she saw the slime change. She remembered their last encounters, where her little friend controlled its own body to form a hand to interact and talk with her. Lohan forced the mass to divide into 5 thin extensions, creating a central palm, and then articulating what appeared to be fingers. In a few seconds, a small hand, the size of a baby's, but perfectly formed and translucent, emerged from the top of the slime. The hand Lohan formed was more shaky than the first time, with well-defined fingers that opened in a clear stop sign. Lohan didn't stop there. He used a little hand to point first at the mana stone in her hand, and then made a horizontal gesture as if cutting the air, a clear sign of disapproval for the game of hiding the stone. The silence in the clearing became heavy. Eliana froze her hand, holding the stone paralyzed in midair. She looked at the small gelatinous hand, then at Lohan's glowing core, and finally it dawned on her. "You didn't find it funny, did you?" she whispered, her voice losing its childish tone. "You were offended because I treated you like I treat animals." Lohan kept his hand raised for a few more seconds, making sure the point was delivered. Then he relaxed his form, letting his fingers melt back into his spherical body, but remained upright, staring directly at her. The elf sighed deeply, dropping her playful stance and placing the mana stone gently on the ground, right in front of Lohan. She didn't try to pick it up again. Instead, she sat down on the grass, crossing her legs respectfully, staying at the same eye level as him. "I'm sorry, little friend," she said, giving a sad but sincere smile. "I'm really sorry I got more excited than I should have when dealing with you. I was so excited about your return and you took longer than the day before, so when you appeared, I was so euphoric that I embarrassed myself. This is a stone from a level 11 Weaver spider." She pushed the stone closer to him, her fingers trembling slightly. "I took it secretly from my master's warehouse." Lohan looked at the stone, and then at the girl who had risked herself for a creature that had just given her the cold shoulder. The pride that had seemed so important seconds ago now seemed like selfishness. "She risked herself for me, and I treated the only person who cared about me like an enemy. Because of a whim of ego, is being isolated from human interaction for so long, taking away my humanity." A small hand formed again above the slime's body. Slowly the jelly on Lohan's body moved, and 5 little fingers appeared in front of Eliana. The small hand moved forward toward the stone, but instead of bending down and picking up the stone, the hand continued straight, extending to an uncomfortable limit for Lohan. But he stood firm and placed his hand under the elf's hand. Eliana was sitting in Caesar with her hands resting on her leg. Feeling that damp, cold little hand rubbing hers made the girl's heart warm and a smile appear on her face. "Will you forgive me?" she asked hopefully. The little hand let go and changed into a thumbs up, then became a slightly deformed sphere before returning to Lohan's body. This was his attempt to make a hand emoji as a way to communicate beyond hand gestures, but this test went wrong. If it worked, I could just make a face for myself, and at least I could show emotions, right? He became thoughtful. "That's great, my friend." The elf let out a relieved squeal, then reached out and pushed the mana stone toward Lohan again. "Go on, take it. I brought it for you." This time Lohan was no longer polite, rolling forward and swallowing the mana stone directly. As soon as the stone entered his body and began to be digested, Lohan was shocked by the energy he was absorbing from the small chips he was able to pull out of it. This mana stone was so energetically charged that Lohan was having difficulty corroding it. This would be a great backup battery, but being a mana stone from a LV11 creature, I wonder what ability I'll receive when I absorb it. "How come you seem so much stronger?" she wondered. confused after observing Lohan more closely. "I feel like the energy in you is much stronger than yesterday." With that said, she moved even closer to Lohan, looking at him in detail, but this time without picking him up. Analyzing his blue and transparent body, it wasn't difficult to notice the biggest difference between yesterday and today. Was this change because you finished absorbing that mana stone? Lohan looked at her for a few seconds before giving her a thumbs up with his little hand. "My teacher already had me study the evolution process of slimes, but theoretically, it shouldn't be this fast." "Do you have some kind of rare innate ability?" she asked in a low, surprised voice. Lohan didn't know how to respond, and in the end, he just remained silent. Ailiana didn't worry, and continued to look at Lohan with curiosity before asking about something else, telling him about her day, complaining about the lesson her teacher had given her. After the misunderstanding was resolved, Lohan and Ailiana talked for a few more minutes before the elf left and said goodbye to Lohan. "My friend, I'll be here again tomorrow," she shouted as she waved back at him, waved her staff conjuring a small tornado of wind around herself, and disappeared into the forest. Lohan looked at that convenient magic with envy and turned away, ready to leave. He didn't mind spending so much time talking to Ailiana, since he had more than enough biomass to absorb in the 2 mana stones he was digesting. To speed up the digestion process and not destroy the forest in front of Ailiana, something he discovered she didn't like from one of the girl's many ramblings, Lohan gave the smaller mana stone to the clone and kept the large one. Thus, the 2 little slimes could roll around the forest without destroying any grass at maximum efficiency at all times. As they rolled around in search of enemies, Lohan noticed his biomass reserve filling up again and bought a few more evolutions. This time he didn't focus solely on increasing digestion efficiency, as he now felt he was already gaining enough biomass per hour, but rather on utility. Being just a ball of slime jelly was very disappointing. Efficient digestion, LV13, LV14. Structural stability, LV8, LV9. Reinforced exoskeleton, LV4, LV5. Instinctive perception, LV5, LV6. Body density, LV4, LV5. Membrane reinforcement, LV9, LV10. Memory resonance, LV1, LV2. Chemosensory aptitude, LV1, LV2. With this wave of evolutions, not only did the biomass he digests, per H-hour increase from 2854 bio to 3140 bio, the jelly of his body became less viscous and easier to control, more malleable. His exoskeleton became more resistant, his perception sharper, his body density greater, his membrane more elastic and resistant. As for the last 2 skills, he felt no difference, since memory resonance only activated in the brains, and memories he consumed, while chemosensory aptitude could be tested again. Activating this skill, Lohan was surprised to realize that he could perfectly smell the mana stone inside him, but this smell was different from the smell he had smelled before. But ignoring that, another familiar smell was slightly picked up by his skill. Intensifying this with instinctive perception, LV6, Lohan saw a faint trace of magical odor around him. This odor was unfamiliar to Lohan's own memory, as he had not smelled it personally until now. In fact, it came from the goblin's memory. It was a smell that Lohan not only paid attention to when reading the creature's memories, but also made a mental note to be on alert when he smelled it around him. Although it did not change the way he moved at all, Lohan's 360-degree vision was working at full speed, as instinctive perception, LV6, analyzed everything around him, like a scanner, searching for the source of that smell. "Very well, you cunning fox, let's see if you can escape me now," Lohan thought as he planned how to deal with that fox, even though its speed was much faster than his. A faint red smoke floated through the forest, tracing a path through the trees to the little slime. This smoke was not something anyone could see. Only those with chemosensory aptitude could sense it. And Lohan looked at them intently. "Should I follow this trail? If I find that fox, what do I do? If they try to do something to me, maybe I can defend myself. But if I have to rely on my slow speed to do something to them, maybe I can only shoot an ice spike and run out of mana right after," he thought doubtfully. If he did nothing, it was possible that the fox would do something to him that would put him at risk again. But if he went after it to get revenge, he also had nothing to do against it. Fortunately, or unfortunately, he didn't have to decide on that. The red smoke that had seemed so sparse before gradually became denser. Lohan looked at them, a little confused, but when he felt that smoke, he understood. The smell was stronger. "Shit, I haven't even decided what to do, and they're getting closer." With no time to lose, Lohan used all of his stored biomass to recover to peak condition, controlled the small clone to merge with him again, and faced the direction from which the smell was approaching. The seconds dragged on much longer than normal. A minute waiting for the fox to approach seemed like hours to Lohan, who was on edge, prepared for the worst. But surprisingly, when a small white head appeared from behind a large, thick tree, Lohan controlled himself so as not to shoot an ice spike directly at that creature. With no means of communication, Lohan just stared at the fox. analyzing for the 10th time whether his position was bad or if he should move to a better place. Unlike him, the fox walked calmly and confidently, without a hint of fear, as it looked at Lohan with curiosity. Tap, tap, tap. The steps of the surprising little fox made no sound other than the ground being touched. Although the ground was covered with dry leaves and broken branches, her paws did not touch anything undesirable. Finally face to face with that curious slime, the fox also looked at the creature with curiosity. She noticed that unlike when the slime was facing the elf girl, where its membrane was soft and relaxed, now in front of her, the creature had entered attack mode, with a hard and resistant exoskeleton formed above the surface of its body, with a matte and reinforced membrane underneath, and its body perfectly tense to jump away from her at any moment. It seems they're not an idiot, she thought with an internal smile, but outwardly showed only indifference, confirming the advanced thought process of the monster in front of her. The fox was almost 100% sure that she was facing another player, like herself. With a little caution, and surprisingly relief, she used one of her innate abilities. "Hello, Slime," a young, graceful female voice sounded in his mind. If it weren't for the immensely stressful situation Lohan was under, it would have been a very pleasant voice. But upon hearing it, Lohan was shocked. With his 360-degree vision, he was sure there was no one else nearby who could speak to him. And the strangest thing was that he didn't see the fox move its mouth. Frightened, the slime rolled backward at full speed to distance itself, trying to keep itself safe by distance. "This is my innate ability, telepathy," the voice sounded again in his mind, a feeling so strange that Lohan was ready to cast an ice spike at it, even more so after hearing the explanation. Shit, did she say telepathy? Is she reading my memory? He was startled, worried that this was somehow real. Although he had seen videos and live streams of other games in the other world, he had never heard of a game that allowed telepathy, let alone something involving the real mind. This feeling was so strange that Lohan felt as if her voice was sounding in his real mind, not the slime's. Then the voice sounded again, surprisingly patient, despite Lohan's outburst. "Calm down. I can only read your shallow thoughts, just your shallow thoughts. If you want me to lose access to your mind, you just have to try a little harder." He was suspicious, but having no other choice, he mentally focused on denying anyone any kind of access to his mind. At first, nothing changed. But after a few more attempts, he finally felt as if something had left his mind. "Damn! I didn't even feel that. Get in there! Since when has she been reading my mind?" He wondered in shock. "Okay, now can we talk?" she asked as she snuggled into the grass beneath her and lay down, looking at the slime with a playful expression. Lohan looked at her for a few seconds. Seeing that she showed no hostility, he tried to answer. "Yes, great, you're really a very interesting slime. How did you manage to survive the brutal first day as this race? Didn't that wave of monsters find you?" she asked curiously, looking him up and down. Although Lohan always considered himself small, his body was already about 30 centimeters in diameter, which meant he was a sphere about 30 centimeters high and 30 centimeters wide. The white fox in front of him was just under 30 centimeters tall, slightly smaller than him, and when lying down, she was even smaller. But on the other hand, she was thinner and longer than Lohan. It was what she said that confused him. "Wave of monsters? What's that?" At his response, the fox looked at him, also confused. The monster wave on the first day. Most players with rare non-human races died before the first night because of this monster wave. How did you survive it with such a fragile body? Lohan became even more confused. "Wave of monsters? I have no idea what she's talking about, but as far as I remember, after entering Elysium for the first time, the old Lohan didn't stay online for more than 5 minutes before disconnecting and going to look for a good guild. Unsuccessfully, he killed himself before even logging back into the game." Analyzing the small changes in slime and realizing that he was as confused as she was, the fox asked incredulously, "Don't tell me you were one of the lucky ones who wasn't in the game during the monster wave. Can I call a rope around my neck luck?" Lohan thought to himself. "So you mean that 30 minutes after a monster player logs in for the first time, an intense wave of monsters turns the forests near him into a battlefield, and logging out is temporarily disabled?" Lohan asked, still shocked. Wasn't it enough to come to the other world as someone alone from the lower zone? But he was also lucky not to lose the character that could change his destiny. But on second thought, he remembered that when he first logged in after taking over this body, even though the forest was corroded by slimes, there were no signs of a fight. Not even the total number of slimes had decreased much since the first time. "Yeah," she said lazily. "Anyway, that's not why I came here. Whether you survived by luck or skill, it doesn't matter anymore. I've been watching you for a few days now, and I've realized that you're far superior to an ordinary slime." Hearing that, Lohan became alert again, his exoskeleton reinforcing itself and his membrane becoming more opaque again. He knew how valuable players with rare races were. Players with epic races had practically noble or celebrity status. Legendary races, as the name suggests, were so far only legends, with no publicly available documentation about them. As for mythical races, Lohan wouldn't even know they existed if he didn't have one himself, so he knew how valuable he would be to the other side. Noticing Lohan's renewed alertness, the fox rolled her eyes and explained, "You don't need to be afraid. I also have a rare race." What she didn't say was that she was 99 sure that this slime had a race much rarer than any other she knew of so far. But with how skittish he had proven to be, the fox did not make her knowledge of this information clear and acted naturally, having been trained in a powerful family since birth, even though she let loose in Elisa much more than in real life. Since no one here knew who she was, she still knew how to behave and how to influence people with her own attitude. And her attitude proved to be correct when the slime relaxed slightly. "Right. Why were you watching me? And why did you come into contact with me?" Lohan asked, until she remembered the most important thing. "And why did you bring that goblin to me?" The first part was within the fox's expectations, but the second part surprised her. "What makes you think I brought the goblin to you?" she asked, her white head slightly tilted, looking at Slime with half-closed eyes. Lohan couldn't tell that he had read the goblin's memory and seen everything that happened before the situation, imagining the weight of such information, so he quickly thought of a response. Fortunately, slimes had no faces or facial expressions, so it was much more difficult for anyone, even an expert in analyzing facial micro-expressions. To analyze him, this was still possible, since Lohan had not bothered to control his own body and his movements already said a lot. But the reinforced membrane and exoskeleton on top made this task very difficult. "I am a slime. My vision is far superior to other creatures," he said, trying to regain his composure. "When the goblin appeared in my vision, I saw you running through the bushes at a much slower speed than you used to escape after he saw me. If you really wanted to escape, you would have gotten away long ago." The fox looked at him for a few seconds before nodding. "You're right. I'm sorry about that. I'll make it up to you. But it was extremely important to ensure your ability before approaching." Lohan looked at her suspiciously. If he had eyes at that moment, he would have had the same expression she had moments ago. "Why did you need to ensure my ability?" Depending on her answer, Lohan was ready to send an ice spike and split her skull in half, especially with her in such a relaxed pose in front of him. But it was that same pose that also made him keep his cool and listen to what she had to say first. It wasn't enough that he had acted rashly with Aeliana a short time ago. He didn't want to rush into things again. The fox got up from where she was lying, making Lohan even more alert, and approached him. When she saw that he rolled away a little as she approached, she stopped and looked at him intently. "I want to invite you to my guild," she said in a serious voice. Lohan thought that was absurd. When the old Lohan was desperate to get a spot in a guild, everyone mocked him, hung up on him, or, at best, just treated him like a liar. Now that he had given up on joining a guild and discovered great potential in his race and class, some crazy fox brought a goblin to try to kill him and then invited him to join her guild. What kind of macabre initiation ceremony is this, to be promoted in the guild? Would he have to face a troll? "No thanks. I'm doing just fine developing on my own. And I think you have serious problems if you bring a monster to kill me and then invite me to your guild as if nothing happened." Lohan refused without thinking twice. This surprised the fox. Unaccustomed to hearing no, she thought the slime would gladly accept to join her guild, especially considering her influence in all the social circles she participated in. Someone unwilling to join her to do something was unheard of. Any investment idea she had, since she was 12 years old, was always received with interest and excitement by everyone. And here she was, being rejected by a bluish jelly bubble in the middle of a forest. The fox blinked, processing the no. It was a strange feeling. It wasn't the anger she felt when some spoiled heir tried to flatter her, but something weird. The slime obviously didn't know he was talking to someone of her identity, and that feeling wasn't bad, despite being rejected. She took a step forward, swaying her tails elegantly as she looked at him curiously. "I've already admitted that I was wrong in how I handled your test, and I've also said that I'll compensate you for it. Isn't that enough?" she asked. Hearing that, if Lohan had eyes, they would have rolled now. Although he had controlled himself not to turn around and walk away a few moments ago, his patience had limits when dealing with unreasonable people. He understood that he was talking to someone who lived in a different world than his, which was the only explanation he had for someone acting that way. And the more he analyzed the situation, the more the way this fox acted reminded him of the students, teachers, and staff from the upper zone he had met in college, which further diminished his intention to continue this conversation, even though he hadn't lived his whole life in this world. Just the last few days had been enough to make Lohan detest those people. I don't need any compensation. Now, if you'll excuse me. I have better things to do than play initiation games with you, Lohan replied, his body tensing as he prepared to roll away. Even though he knew he wasn't as fast as her, this whole conversation was stressing him out. Wait, the fox exclaimed, her sweet voice now carrying a note of urgency she hadn't used in a long time. You don't understand. I'm not inviting you to be just any member, based on her assumption, which had proven to be more accurate each time she had come to observe him over the past few days, and which had been further confirmed by the news she had recently received. The importance that this slime would have in her future plans was immeasurable, something that affected not only her, or her guild, but also the future of several planets under her command. Lohan stopped, but still did not relax the membrane. Oh, no. Are you going to tell me that you want to invite me to be a captain in your guild? Or rather, the vice president? He asked sarcastically, already thinking that it was not worth wasting any more time here. The fox let out a short laugh, which made Lohan's sixth sense stir, and spoke in surprise, staring at him. I really don't want you to be a normal member. Your guess is correct. I want you to be my vice president. Lohan froze completely.